Welcome to Inflection Point Podcast, where we cultivate change from the inside out as we ponder the Cairo question. Will Cairo have to protest in his lifetime for the birthright to freely and peacefully exist in the skin in which he was born? We stand on the belief that dismantling racism goes beyond laws and legislation or politics and economics. Here, anti-racism activation is presented as an inside job where personal transformation and accountability impact social change. So take a seat at the anti-racism activation table with Inflection Point Podcast.
So thank you for tuning in to the newest episode of Inflection Point Podcast. And this is actually our last episode for 2024. So we challenge our audience to listen actively and intentionally for the purpose of critical self-reflection, that in-depth perspective taking, personal transformation, and ultimately social impact. I am your host, Anita Russell, and here's a quick hello from co-hosts Mavis and Gail.
Hello. I'm Mavis Bauman. Welcome.
Hi, I'm Gail Hunter, and welcome to our program.
Excellent. So if you've been following us throughout 2024, we have focused on the art of community conversation, particularly in today's climate of systemic and institutional racism, anti-racism activation, equity, diversity, inclusion, book banning, all of these things that have been kind of on our radar screen for the last, I'd say at least since 2020 in a really, really big way. And so while 2024 kind of represented a new beginning, right, the stage for 2025 has been set for a metamorphic shift where authoritarianism or democracy will ultimately prevail. We just got finished with the election, and there were lots of things that have been coming out as a result of the election, or some of the things that we witnessed, how polarized we are, how separated we are from one another. And so in this episode, we consider the appeal of identity politics, as well as the flaws of identity politics. We were all kind of victims, if you will, of identity politics, I would say, to probably the greatest extent that I've seen since I've been voting, and I've been voting since Jimmy Carter was the president. And I've never seen things to this extent as what we saw in the 2024 election. So we're going to be talking about stripping away those complex nuances of the individual in favor of assigning this representation, this particular value or a single characteristic to a collective group. So you got the Black group over there. You have this group over there. You have the white women over there. You got the college educated. You got this group and you got that group, and pulling out one particular characteristic that kind of identifies us and puts us in these various categories. That's identity politics. But there's something that we can be doing in place of that. So that's what we're going to kind of explore today, and just really understanding that identity politics really plays a tremendous role in the polarization that we're currently seeing in this country. So we're going to have a conversation about that. So Mavis and Gail, let's start with this question. Can America pull back from the identities favored by liberals and conservatives to a more integrative, more inclusive identity based on our diverse makeup? We know this country is very diverse, and also on our founding principles. So what's your response to that question?
You ready, Gail?
Yeah, go ahead if you're ready. Yeah, or I'll go.
Trying to think on my feet here. Okay, go ahead, Gail.
Well, I think we have to. I think that the short answer to that is, can we? I pray and hope that we can, because I think we all need to. Because if not, this country is possibly in the process of a major transformation that may not be what everyone really exactly had wanted. So I think it's a really critical time period. Yeah.
So what do you think about it, this particular topic within the context of the Bill of Rights, the founding principles, like all of those things that this country was founded on, that almost feels like those ideals are kind of being hazed over?
Yeah, they've been shelved in a way. I have to echo Gail and say, I hope that we can. I think it's really, really critical, to look back even in our lifetimes at how at least I was exposed to politics. It was not like this. It was not all these groups that kind of didn't want to listen to each other. Just today, I got to thinking about, is it natural for us as humans to create an us and them? Do we have to do that? I found a really interesting article written by Madeleine Albright that I'll cite more later, but she says the impulse to choose sides is kind of inherent in our species. So we are going to have to really work hard to behave in a way that the Constitution intended for us to behave, in the way that the Bill of Rights intended for us to behave. Not me, me, me. It's like, what are we as a collective? So, I think that's a pretty powerful concept. You think about even Lord of the Flies and books we read as kids, there was always a separation of groups. But Albright talks about that this is what democracy is intended to facilitate and bring us into the room and get beyond it. So I'll leave that there for the moment.
Yeah, I think it's about respecting the individuation of each of us, the uniqueness of each of us, and also honoring and respecting the collective similarities that we all certainly have also.
Sure.
And it's being able to listen to one another, to have those conversations that is going to be crucial, I believe. There isn't anybody that wouldn't say to somebody, I don't want you to listen to me, or I don't want you to accept me as a human being that is equal to you. I mean, nobody, I don't care what color skin you have, would ever say that that's what they want. And so for anybody to believe that may be a true thing, that there's a hierarchy here, or that whether it's you're looking at cultural or socioeconomic or religious or whatever or the color of your skin, nobody believes that nobody would ever want that for themselves. So why would we want that for somebody else?
Exactly. And so whenever I think about like the Bill of Rights and the Constitution and all of those different things, they are these ideals upon which this country supposedly is supposed to be based, right? But when you think about it, even in the creating the Bill of Rights, creating the Constitution,
right.
It was still this underlying thing that said all of this is designed for this group of people, but it's not designed for that group of people.
Right.
But when you think about, if you forget all of that, the division, identity politics, if you forget all of that and you just look at some of the content, for the people, by the people, and of the people. And when I look at that, it says to me that it's the people who have a responsibility and an accountability for what this country is looking like, right? And that means collectively the people, right? Because I look at it like this, like my culture might be different from yours. My hair might be different from yours, right? The music I listen to, the way I dance might be different from you, the language I speak. But when you really boil it down to the basic personal liberty, we all want the same thing.
Absolutely. Around the world, as a matter of fact.
That's right.
Exactly.
Yeah. All humans, yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you have things, kind of set up, and you think about like, what are those virtues that we really can have, not just even as Americans, but just as human beings? What are some of those virtues, right? Liberty, equality, equity, justice. Why would we not
integrity?
those things?
Yeah.
Why would we not want that?
Of course we want that. I think everybody wants that for themselves, and it breaks down when you have to put it on, do what you want it for everyone, right?
Yeah.
That's when you have to look in that mirror and start getting honest with yourself.
Absolutely. Now, you
Well,
all remember Maslow and his hierarchy of needs and everything, right? I had read something about him that when he was putting that together, he actually spent time with the indigenous community, right?
Right.
But the way he took what they were doing, he added something different to it that wasn't actually there. And so you know how you got this triangle and everything kind of goes up? In the indigenous community, it's not the individual that's at the top. It's the community that's up. But he flipped the script and created this scenario where it's all about me as an individual. And so when you think about something as basic as that, here's a community that saw it very differently, where ultimately you're not just responsible to yourself, you're responsible for your community.
And that means everyone in that community.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah.
Absolutely. So
I gotta say, I'm feeling a little guilty these days because I sort of fell prey to these identity groups and had my own feelings about them based on what the media was saying. And I'm thinking, how could that particular group not be thinking like me? And I think it's as you say often, Anita, it's really dangerous to ascribe a characteristic as if one group is a monolith. There are so much variety within a group. But I feel like in some ways I bought the narrative from the media. I was so convinced in terms of Kamala being able to win the election that when she didn't, I realized there's a lot that I'm not hearing. I'm in my own identity group in a way, and believing what others in my group might believe. I wish that the media wouldn't present it in that way. All the pollsters, I think I need to just turn off every poll because they do that in spades, right? Every group is identified a certain way. And that sort of raises up in you things that really aren't true. They might have statistical value in some way, but they can change on a dime, as we know. But anyway, I really have to wrestle with that.
And I think that's a very valid point. And I think we all have to wrestle with that, because what it boils down to is, like, you hear me talk a lot of times about what are my personal thoughts, beliefs, and ideas that I hold for me. And am I, in holding those thoughts, beliefs, and ideas, presenting something that could be remiss to someone else? Right. And so, again, when you think about, we're all human beings, we all basically want and need essentially the same things. But when you start getting into these power struggles and you start getting into these identity politics, you end up in a mess, which is exactly where we are right now. We're just kind of in a
Which is where we are.
That is where we are. Yeah.
We're in a mess. And so one of the resources that we have just sort of put forth this thought that American democracy is not well served by identity polarization. All it does is split us up.
Yeah.
It just splits us up.
Yeah.
And we create this false narrative about why this group should be held to a higher status, if you will, than this group over here. So it kind of gets into this class and status and all of these different things that, when you think about it, the bottom line is we all basically want and need the same things.
Yeah,
we do.
And I think, sometimes maybe both of you can hold those two things simultaneously, like be falling prey to the identity politics, But in our hearts, we know that we are compassionate towards all humans. There's no one that we would treat the way we are kind of being led to think of them by the media, by anybody who classifies a group, in a monolithic way. So, I can see myself holding those two things at the same time and causing, an internal conflict.
Right. Yeah. And a lot of this stuff, it reminds me of, maybe it's when we went to South Africa. When we went to South Africa, that was my first time setting foot on African soil. And one of the things that I've shared this, I think I've probably shared this multiple times on this show, but one of the things that I did for 30 days before we got on the plane, I'm a woman of God and a woman of faith. And what I asked God to do was remove anything from me that would cause me to go into somebody else's country, somebody else's culture, somebody else's religion, somebody else's food, somebody else's music, and bring my prejudgment with me. What I wanted was to have the experience of being in a place where I am being influenced in a very positive way by something I have never experienced before. And I didn't want to be judgmental. I did not want to bring my American way of thinking into that country with me. So it was a very powerful thing that I personally went through because I didn't want to present any harm to people that I don't even know.
We do that on a huge scale, right? I mean, if people in particular don't travel, they fall prey to that much more. I remember my dad, he came to see me when I was studying in Puerto Rico, and he says, "Why won't they talk English?"
Yeah.
Because it's like we're so central in our lives that why wouldn't they talk English?
Egocentric.
Yes, egocentric. That's really what I was.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Traveling takes you out of the center, and it's just so important. Yeah.
And it's real simple. You go to somebody else's country, it's not about you.
No, exactly.
It's not about you.
Exactly. Yeah, so true. So true.
So if we think about what life could look like I often do this. I'll sit down and think about what could life actually look like if we weren't polarized the way that we are. Like, for example, the three of us. Polarization does not exist in our relationship.
No.
It just doesn't.
Yep.
Here I am, Black woman, two white women coming from completely different paths in life. But the thing
traffic locations too,
Right, exactly. But the thing that I always remember is that when I met Gail, it was an instant click in the relationship.
Yeah.
When I met Mavis, it was an instant click. And I can honestly say that part of that for me as a Black woman was understanding that I have met these two women. I have encountered these two women where racism is not a part of their belief system.
There, yeah, that's right.
It's just not there.
That can happen.
And that does happen. It can happen.
Yes.
We're living, right? Yeah.
Well, I was reading a lot about how, all of these different identity politics, and I kept seeing urban versus rural. And I'm thinking, why is that? Why is that? I've lived in rural areas and I've lived in urban areas, and I'm thinking that everybody's like me, but when I go home and I hear what people are talking about, their lives have been so different from mine now.
Yeah.
And that just needs to be heard and appreciated and talked about,
Absolutely.
or else we're just going to the corners, going to our own corners.
Right. So let's think about like what would democracy look like if we didn't have identity politics?
Mhm.
Just think about that. What could that look like?
What humanity could look like, right? Um, it would be the hierarchy of the indigenous people, that
Yeah,
he
yeah.
completely switched around, right?
Mm, mm.
The values and beliefs would be opposite of what they have become in this country. Yeah.
Something else that I came across, I wonder what you guys think about the idea of having ending the two-party system. Does the two-party system, Republicans and Democrats, separate us even more beyond identity politics? And if we had just no parties, we just voted, we had no electoral college, would that support the end of identity politics? Because it seems like, again, people are going to their corners. They're very much identified with whether or not their dad was Republican, or how many generations have we voted with one party. What do you guys think about the two-party system? I mean, is that part of the problem?
I think it's become part of the problem.
Yeah, I would agree too, that it's become part of the
Yeah.
problem. Even when you look at it historically,
It was.
always been this like this. Like in research for this show, I found and it was I forgot what the exact thing was, but they were literally comparing over the course of time.
Mhm.
They show
Right. Yeah.
on election night, and they showed a map, and it's the red and the blue. And they
Mhm.
were showing how, like in the 60s, it looked one way, but then in the 80s, it looked a completely different way, but still just the red and the blue for the most part. And so I think what that said to me is that this stuff isn't necessarily fluid. It doesn't just automatically happen. It happens because we allow it.
Yeah.
Right.
We allow it to evolve the way that it does. And when you think about, like when I think about civic engagement, I became aware of civic engagement when I was in like 11th grade or something, right? And I became aware of it because I took this class called The Problems of Democracy, right? And in that class, one of the things that we were allowed to do was go on a field trip and go down to the courthouse and sit in the courtroom and listen to a case. So I'm like 15 years old, and I'm sitting in a courtroom listening to this case. That impacted me in terms of how I see civic engagement. Right? I see it as something like we all have to be involved.
It's like traveling. You gotta
Right.
experience it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
To really understand it. Yeah.
Right. You really got some good background there, Anita.
Yeah, and some of the things like I have like a list of some of the things that if we were to look at democracy beyond politics. So, for example, if we look at policy over personalities, like if you think about the previous election, this latest election, it was a lot of like personality stuff that was embedded in there.
Right.
And you get to the point where it's like, well, I'm not even sure what you actually stand for, but I like your personality. Like
Personality seems to be the top.
Exactly. And that is not a function of good civic engagement.
No.
Right?
No.
And also under the policy over personalities, it's about shifting the focus from symbolic representation or identity-driven leadership to policies that benefit diverse communities equitably. So no matter how you look at it, when you talk real democracy, you can't get away from diversity, equity, inclusion.
No.
Yeah.
Not if you're going to talk about democracy.
Right, exactly.
Right.
Exactly. So we
Yeah.
got about 2 more minutes before we move on. So is there anything else that is popping into your mind when you think about this democracy beyond identity politics?
Well, I can tell you, I'm going to be thinking about it more as we go. The next election is starting now in a way. you know, just how I'm hearing things and what I'm paying attention to. I would love to see us get beyond it and just become a country of more compassion for others instead of separation. We're viewed as such a leader in the world. And we're the shine is off that crown. We're embarrassing ourselves by the way that we're behaving. We don't need to do this. We have the plans to behave differently.
Right.
We have the laws to behave differently.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I want to mention one more thing and then we'll go to break. Another thing that's mentioned under this conversation around democracy beyond identity politics is the idea of cross-identity collaboration, building coalitions across different identity groups to address shared challenges, because we share the same challenges. We all got economic issues. When COVID came, we all went to the grocery store and there was no more toilet paper. We all had that experience, right? And addressing those shared challenges such as climate change, healthcare, economic inequality, these are big chunks of problems and issues that impact all of us, irrespective of the age.
It's universal, right?
Remember what we did. We fought over masks and whether or not this was real, crazy.
Exactly.
And need to be divisive.
Yeah, so we're going to now hold that thought, Gail, and we're going to take a break and we'll come back and resume the conversation. So welcome back to Inflection Point Podcast and our final community conversation for 2024. In today's episode, our topic of discussion is navigating the road ahead through identity politics. So at this point, I'm going to pass it over to Mavis because she's got something really, really interesting to share.
I'm excited about this. I'm going to quote from an article by Madeleine Albright, former U.S. Secretary of State. The article is called Us versus Them. Us versus Them thinking is tearing America apart. But here's why I'm still hopeful about the future. So that was the title of her piece. In the piece, she says, in today's not so united states, we must acknowledge that our divisions extend beyond matters of political affiliation to include religion, race, gender, education, ethnicity, sexual orientation, and urban versus rural. Confronted with reality, many citizens are tempted to either retreat more deeply into their respective group identities or to insist piously that such categories are irrelevant and shouldn't matter. Neither approach works. She says, exacerbating our differences is one road to disaster, denying them is another. Instead of fantasizing about a harmony that is out of reach, we should focus on ensuring that our inevitable disagreements lead, whenever possible, to constructive outcomes. Democracy was designed to aid such a process, and that voters will ultimately prefer to be builders than to be bullies.
Yes.
And I just love the way she positions that. And then the last line in her piece is, she says, at home, only by acting on that conviction that we can avoid paralysis. Going forward, let us advocate vigorously on behalf of causes that concern us as individuals or groups, but let us never forget that we belong in addition to a larger circle. No matter how we define us, no matter how we define them, we, the people, is an inclusive phrase.
Yes.
Yes.
I love that. Yeah.
That's it. Yeah, that's it. Right?
Yeah. That's
We,
right.
the people.
So maybe
We all can have our differences, right? We all can have our differences. We can have our uniqueness, but there's still we, the people, right?
And democracy provides a forum to work through those differences. and to come up with what she says, a constructive future,
Right. That's right.
Constructive solution. So yeah, I just love it. I was an admirer of hers anyway. And she wrote this right after the insurrection in 2021. So she was full of, that wounding. And I think she just captured it really well. So thanks for letting me share that.
Yeah. So, but I want to take the conversation a little bit. What I'd like to know for you personally, how did that resonate for you and how you live your life, the work that you're doing, even being a part of this podcast? Like, what were the pieces in what she said that, like, wow, that really hit home for me?
I think that's kind of where I started out today, that I feel a little guilty. I think I kind of fell into the us and them mentality. In part, like I was saying, I feel like I'm a very compassionate individual, but when I would hear about behavior of certain groups, I would be shocked, like young men voted this way. Why? Why? I want to step back more and take that more to heart and put myself in rooms where there are conversations that are working through this instead of telling me what to believe about any specific group. I think we just really have to, get together. It's like traveling again, be with other groups of people, engage in those conversations.
Absolutely.
But that's the key, is really having conversations. And so many people have forgotten how to do that. Yeah, because they're not listening. Yeah, listening is a big, huge piece of having a conversation and communication. Yeah, I spent a lifetime trying to, learning myself and teaching others that, we have to, it's one thing, we all want to be heard, but we all want to be heard, right? And so that means I've got to listen to you as much as I would need you to listen to me. And that's what I think she was talking about, that through that process, that's where collaboration can come from, right?
Right. Listening without reacting, taking a while to let things soak in and find that part of you that can really understand.
Not from my perspective, but from your perspective, from the other person's perspective. I have to step away from my own perspective in order to be open to the experience and open to hearing what the other person's perspective is and why.
And how might we find a common solution?
Yeah.
What do we both want?
Right.
Incredible statements. Oh my gosh. That whole idea of perspective taking, how near and dear that is.
Right. Yeah.
The concept of perspective taking, meaning, can you literally step outside of your own thoughts, ideas, at least for the purpose of hearing where the other person is coming from and having an understanding of where they're coming from? Doesn't mean you have to agree, but you have to at least acknowledge the fact that they have just as much right to their perspective as you has to yours.
Right.
Yeah, one of the three crucial listening skills is called validation, and that's what that is. I can understand from your perspective how you feel this way or why you're thinking this way, and I can understand that. And that's not being condescending. It's truly encompassing all that information to see, oh, okay, I get it. I can understand that.
Validation feels so good.
Yeah, and I don't have to agree with it. It's not about
exactly.
I can or I don't have to. It's that I understand. I'm willing to understand.
Yes. Yeah. And I think where we are now as a society, it's moving away from me understanding your perspective. And again, I don't have to agree with your perspective, but I need to at least understand it. And one of the ways that showed up for me when I think about like voting and all of that, I've shared multiple times that my mom was the person that I would go to whenever elections were coming up. And I wanted information from her, but my mother also taught me, you got to know why you're voting for somebody. You can't just vote for them because their skin looks like yours. You can't just vote for them because you like the clothes that they wear. You can't just vote with them because they came from the same town as you. My mother really emphasized, and she didn't necessarily tell me those words directly, but that is the lesson that I got out of it. Is that, so why am I pulling this lever for this particular person? And when someone asks me, am I able to explain it? Why I voted the way that I did. Example.
Yeah.
After the election, you know how they do the polls when people are leaving and they'll, interview them just coming, the exit polls is what they call those. And I saw this one that just totally blew me away. It was a woman who came out, and she, because the journalist wouldn't necessarily ask you, who did you vote for? But if you disclose that information, then you could have a conversation about it. And the woman disclosed that she had voted for Donald Trump, right? And the journalist asked her, well, why? What is it that motivated you? And her response was, oh, it's his values. And the journalist said, oh, tell me about his values. Which one of those values really resonated with you? She couldn't name a single value. She stumbled over her words. She could not name why she truly voted for this individual in terms of what is the alignment and the connection to my own belief system. She couldn't do it.
And that was many people, I believe.
Yeah.
But also couldn't do that.
It'd be interesting to somehow discern how deeply the average citizen goes into what they know about the person that they're going to vote for. Is it what their friends are saying? Have they read anything? Have they
really do they do their homework? Right.
The consequences of tariffs or anything, how deeply do they go into it?
And we think that we're voting for a president of the United States. It's our responsibility to do that, to really look and hear and see and understand, what is this person saying? What is this person standing for? What is it that their intention is? Right? We have to do that.
She could have said anything, really. She could have said anything that she liked about it, maybe not even a value, but she was flummoxed, right? Yeah. She couldn't say.
Because she didn't know, right?
Yeah. No value.
Yeah.
Not a one. So let's think about this idea of regenerative democracy. Some of the some of those challenges related to identity politics, the risk of alienation, right? You got some people that are completely like, I don't even want to vote. To me, that's alienation, right? Marginalized communities, and also this idea of balancing specific needs with universal needs. So there are specific needs that I might have as a young mother, right? So there are some specific needs for that, but then there's these universal needs. Right. And these are the needs that everybody needs, like clean water, a nice environment, good schools. Those are things that are universal needs of all of us, right? But it's a matter of balancing all of that out so that your specific needs don't totally and completely override what the universal needs might be, right? And it's developing those policies that address systemic inequality, systemic inequities, while appealing to the common good. Right. So you still have to hold this idea in your mind of the common good, those universal needs, while at the same time understanding there are diverse needs that are there as well, right? And in order for identity, let me read this exactly as it said, a post-identity politics democracy must work to reduce social divisions. That has to be a part of the process of democracy.
That would be the goal of it, right? That has to be the intention for all. Not to increase it, but to reduce them.
It's as if there's more than identity politics. There's individual politics. I need what I need for me, and I'm not really worried about anybody else.
Right.
I think I guess that just surfaces when people are full of fear or desperation, or I don't know, but we have to come out of ourselves a little bit. Again, how much do we need? Can we compromise on anything so that everyone can eat and drink clean water and so on? Yeah.
Exactly. And there's no real reason why we can't be able to do
that's right.
Right. And so when you start thinking about this idea of regenerative democracy, strengthening democratic foundations, as an example, restoring public trust, election reforms, expanding voter access, reducing partisan gerrymandering, like all of these things need to be a part of the conversation of regenerative democracy, right?
Right.
I keep thinking of one phrase I heard from Heather Cox Richardson when she was giving some talks post-election. She said, or maybe even she said, this is our country. This country belongs to the people, not the politicians. It's like I had to be reminded of that. You know, the information flow is so lopsided. It's our country.
That's right.
We need to play a role in it, to be active in it, to care about others around us. We're never going to have a peaceful environment.
And it was set up to be we the people. It wasn't set up to be you or me or right.
That's exactly what
it was we.
Yeah. Right.
It's the we the people. It's for the people, by the people, and of the people.
Right.
And that's all the people.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We all have a say and a role in this democracy that we need to regenerate at this point. And one of the things that I would also add is the idea of revitalizing leadership as a social process. Like I do some facilitation, on-call facilitation with the Center for Creative Leadership. And that's one of the things that I love the way they talk about leadership, because they talk about it as a social process. It is a process where everybody is involved. It's not just one, it's not just the people at the top, right? Or John Maxwell and this idea, the leader within you. We all are leaders.
Right.
Different degrees, different roles, different situations.
Different expertise.
Yeah, exactly. And if we don't take that mindset that as a citizen, I need to be engaged, I need to be educated, and I need to be developed as a leader. Not a leader necessarily, I'm going to be the CEO of a company, but I want to be the leader of my community. I want to be the leader of my family.
Yeah.
Not looking at leadership as something that exists outside of who you are as an individual.
Right. We all have the capacity.
We need a reboot.
Yes, we do.
Definitely.
Definitely need a reboot. Yeah.
There's some other comments about regenerative democracy. I like this statement as well. Remaining a democracy is not automatic. It requires everything that we've been talking about. It requires active involvement by citizens, vigilance against threats, and constant adaptation to societal changes. Our American society is changing.
Yeah.
Not lily white.
Yeah.
It just isn't.
No.
Every time I think about our country, when I think about it from the context of nature, I think about a field of wildflowers. When you look at a field of wildflowers, you remember my poem. I talked about this in my the field of wildflowers. You see every color, every height, every.
That's right. Yeah.
And that's exactly how we are as human beings, but we don't function that way.
Right. You can look at each individual flower and it's beautiful, but when you look at that field,
exactly,
it's incredible, right? Yeah.
And there isn't, I can honestly say, there isn't one single group, if you will, if you're talking about Europeans who immigrated here, Asians who immigrated here, Black people who were forced to be here, but then there were also Black people who immigrated here. All of that is a reflection of the diversity of humanity.
Yes.
And why do we not?
That's why I love this country.
Right. That's what this country was intended for.
Right. Diversity, variety is just so lovely and stimulating and educating.
Exactly. And you learn so much. You learn so much. Again, I refer back to when we went to South Africa and when we went to Rwanda as well. I learned so much about being a human being because I stepped out of my own environment of who I was on a daily basis as a human being, and I had a different experience, and it made me a better person.
Yeah. It's like discovering how you're multifaceted, right? You're not just one. Yeah.
Exactly.
We all are.
And
so I feel like we could do this. Mm-hmm. We can do this. It's not going to be.
We can.
And it's going to take a whole lot of grassroots movement to make it happen.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. There are so many different ways people can get involved. One short Google search, and you can find 50, 100 different organizations that care about democracy. Mm-hmm. And it's not, I mean, there are organizations that are not just Democratic or Republican, Democrat or Republican.
No.
And I think that would be, there's one in New Jersey. I think I've got to get involved and see how they're thinking about things. Mm-hmm. They just want people to be politically involved and to be knowledgeable about who's running for office.
Right.
And it's also because everybody in New Jersey is subject to the same, slate of politicians. Mm-hmm. Let's deal with this together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And combating some of those threats to democracy, such as disinformation, propaganda, authoritarianism, like all of those. And what about economic inequity, inequality? We talk about all of these things on a basis. But here's a good one. Embrace innovation while preserving core values. Leveraging technology for inclusive participation, resilience against AI, because we already know that there's a dark side to AI, and unchecked balance. Be innovative about that.
Mm-hmm. Be open, present, and innovative, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a part of our life. Yeah. Let's use it for us.
Yeah, to be creative. Mm-hmm. It's like my colleague in Rwanda, Deborah, says, if you've identified a problem and you have an idea, you're in business. Mm-hmm. You can just push that idea forward, you're in business. And that's really kind of all it takes is willing to take action about something you see could be made better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And wouldn't it be really, really great if the United States really was that example of a fully functioning, working, democratic society? Wouldn't it be great if we were the example of that?
We could be that example.
Mm-hmm. I could.
And it's going to take...
each of us have to do our work within ourselves.
Absolutely. Right? That's why when I think about all this work, I always go back to the grassroots.
Right.
Grassroots. Because right now we're kind of in this grown zone. Like I've learned this concept recently called the grown zone. And I feel like we kind of came into, we went through the 2024 election and we had identity politics. We got Project 2025. So we're in this polarization zone right now, right? But as time progresses, between 2025 and 2028, it's going to be a lot of moaning and groaning. Right, a lot of that. And so it's that zone, that space, that time that's going to be really, really difficult for us. And then you kind of get, as you're coming out of 2028, now we're ready for another election cycle. what is going to happen in that emergent zone? Because at that point, it'll be two choices. There's only two choices on the table, right? Authoritarianism, which is the direction that we seem to be headed in, or regenerative democracy. I'm regenerative democracy.
I'm with you.
That's what,
Yeah.
and I call that the twilight zone of emergent possibilities. What are we doing in that chaotic space, in that grown space, so that something meaningful will emerge in that emergence?
Out of chaos comes change, and we can create that.
Well, and maybe we had to come to this edge to really appreciate and regenerate the democracy we have, or it would be crumbling in small bits over time.
Exactly.
It's time now to open our eyes. Yeah.
Absolutely, because we know, if authoritarianism, then the next phase could be 1984 totalitarianism, and we're really in trouble. So we're really out of time at this point. I want to close out with this quote from Kimberly Williams Crenshaw. She's one of the brains behind the critical race theory and all of that stuff. That they wanted to be banned and all of that. But here's this really powerful quote. My greatest wish is to be able to say that our forward trajectory has once again found its footing, so that these comments can serve as a mere epilogue to a journey whose destination is clearly within reach. At minimum, I would have hoped that the massive social reckoning prompted by the killing of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor would have opened pathways for more critical thinking about law rather than less. That critical race theory would have been found as an invaluable conceptual framework within the global movement to uncover the systemic dimensions of racial and intersectional injustice. So critical race theory and intersectionality have now been labeled as divisive, dangerous, and un-American. But those are the spaces that we need to be in. So we have zero time. So always we relate this back to the Cairo question. Will Cairo have to fight in his lifetime for the birthright to freely and peacefully exist in the skin in which he was born? This ultimate question, only we can answer that question. Cairo is 4 years old. What his life is going to look like 10 years from now, 15 years from now, is 100% dependent upon the accountability that we hold for ourselves today, right? So I want to thank our audience for joining us on InflexionPoint Podcast right here on Transformation Talk Radio. We are here every first and third Wednesday at 3 p.m. Pacific time, 6 p.m. Eastern time, as we continue our conversation. So we'll see you in 2025.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to Inflection Point Podcast, where our mantra is cultivating change from the inside out. The journey towards anti-racism and social change doesn't stop here. Truth, reconciliation, and healing come from ongoing, open, honest, and deliberate conversations. Continue to dive in and deconstruct your thoughts, ideas, and beliefs as we band together to manifest social change. Tune in to Inflection Point Podcast every first and third Wednesday at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern, here on TransformationTalkRadio.com for more conversations about how we can cultivate change from the inside out.